My partner has been through a lot. We had been dating for 2 years and planning a life together when she was diagnosed with cancer. At the time she was in school for a dual graduate degree program and managed to finish it. Treatment was rough on her and she struggled a lot through it, and hasn't done well mentally dealing with the unfairness of it all. How different her body is after surgeries, and the fear of it coming back. All perfectly understandable, and I've been as supportive as I can throughout it all. Now all that said, she went into the graduate programs after we started dating, and one of the degrees was at a very expensive school for something that was only related and not required for the work she planned on doing, which would never pay very well. I questioned her about it gently at the time, but she was adamant about getting the expensive degree. It was her life. And we agreed it would be fine, because we could utilize public service loan forgiveness to pay off her debt that would total $100K. This was before cancer. I earn a considerable amount more than her. When we started dating I made 4x, and even with her degrees I make 3x what she does. I've always been happy to spend money on her. And after having moved in together over a year ago and proposing shortly after, I really went into the mindset of it being our money. When we moved in she was finishing her degrees and I covered 100% of our bills, including some tuition costs for an extra semester since she was slightly delayed by her treatment. This was totally fine because school was her job and she'd be able to contribute when she graduated, and even though I make much more, if we are both working full-time jobs it felt fair. Now that she has graduated and started working, she is miserable at her job mostly because she is incredibly anxious that she isn't doing it well, and doesn't feel like her school prepared her. She was already prone towards anxiety and depression, she takes medicine for it. But mentally she is in a very bad spot because of all this. On top of that she feels like she doesn't doing enough for her health, mostly exercise, to keep her healthy to reduce the cancer from coming back, but she says she is too tired after work to do much else than occasionally go on a walk. Recently she got the idea in her head to start working half weeks to give her more time to exercise and stress her out about work less. She says not knowing for sure how long she'll live has changed her priorities about working. Before all this she was a pretty driven type of personality, working multiple jobs. But working part-time doesn't meet the requirements for public service loan forgiveness. We've talked about it extensively and she feels it is important for her to work part-time. But I am not very comfortable with the idea for many reasons. I get where she is coming from in her needs, but feel like she is looking for a quick fix to her problems. That puts us in a pretty big hole financially because she is so miserable instead of fully dealing with her problems. I'd be more okay with it if it was short-term while she sorted through some things, but she says she just wants more time to exercise and be stress-free, so she doesn't know when that would end. I just feel like she is taking our relationship, which is already unbalanced, and asking to make it a lot more so, and solely because she is in a position to do so because of my job. We can financially afford it, but I haven't been able to come to terms about the disproportionality it would create in our relationship. P.S. My longtime partner wants to start working half-time to relieve her work stress and give her more time to take care of her health, but it makes me uncomfortable because she has $100,000 of debt and it would make our relationship very unbalanced. I am currently divorced from my ex Thomas of 30 years. We ended up seeing a lawyer to help with dividing stuff. Everything was pretty much wrapped up till he said he no longer wanted any part of our kids' lives. I didn't argue with him about it since I already know what it's like having a parent who doesn't want you around, or wants to be in your life. I asked what he wanted me to tell the kids and he just said, "Whatever you think is best, I don't care. I don't want to parent anymore." Everything was in agreement and signed with no fuss. A few weeks later I get a call from my ex-mill asking if we could meet each other. When I came over she broke down crying and begging to let my ex see his kids again. I was confused about what she meant because not once did he contact me after meeting the lawyer. She went on about how my ex said he really missed them and that I was just a petty B*TCH for taking full custody. Also that he was crying for days about it. I told her my version of events and she called it BS, saying her son wouldn't lie like that, especially not about his kids. Then I decided to call him in front of her. He didn't know she and I were meeting that day. I said, "Hey, has a soccer game in a few days," which he did, and I was wondering if you wanted to go? I know he'd really love it and be happy to see you. He instantly said no. I already said I'm not doing this anymore. I asked, well, how do you think this is going to affect Denise, his mom? She is over the moon about them. He just said she loves me more than the kids, so I doubt this will be an issue for her. After a bit more talking, we finally hung up. Ex-Mill was straight-faced and nodded at everything that just happened. She asked me to leave and said we would be in touch. Later that day I got a call from my ex saying how it's my fault he was kicked out of his mom's house, and possibly will be taken off her will. Also that none of his family members will talk to him because of what Ex-Mill heard. He threw a lot of insults at me before I hung up, and now him and his mates keep calling and texting me. My friend is saying I shouldn't have said anything in the first place and I ruined his life. Yes, I plan to let Denise see the kids because I know she just wants to give them the world along with the rest of his family. I got my son a 7K motorcycle for his 18th birthday this past June. My son is obsessed with automobile and loves motorcycles. In his room he has plenty of models and posters of motorcycles of all types. His bio dad passed away when he was just 12, now I'm married to my current husband and he has kids of his own. My husband has always been against my son's interest in motorcycles. He thinks I'm encouraging him to be reckless, distracting him from school and by extension his future, and spoiling him and blowing away money by spending 7K on a motorcycle. This caused some tension between him and my son, so I told him to stop complaining about it. Around 2 weeks ago, my son's motorcycle went missing. We opened a police report but nothing came out of it. It just disappeared. My husband had a smirk on his face the entire time, just walking around saying, "I told you so. You just wasted your money." This was unbearable to hear, to be quite honest. My mother-in-law visited few days ago. She was talking about the other house my husband owns and mentioned seeing a motorcycle. One that's similar to the one that we lost in my husband's carriage while she was cleaning it. She goes to clean that house weekly even though it's empty. My husband plans on giving it to his kids as inheritance. I was puzzled. I asked if she was certain, but she showed me a photo she took of it which confirmed that it was indeed my son's motorcycle. I immediately rushed to call my husband and confront him about it. He admitted that he took and hid the motorcycle in his garage as a last resort after me and his stepson kept brushing him and his thoughts off about the 7K being spent on something unnecessary and that could cause issues. I blew up at him demanding he return it. He refused and told me he had been considering selling it and giving the money back to me so I could use it wisely this time. I told him I was serious and that I'd call the police. He literally said, "This is a family matter and cops can't do shit about it." I had enough. I called the cops soon as I ended the call with him. The motorcycle was found and returned. But my husband had to be taken in since there was an open file about the motorcycles going missing. He was let go eventually, but he was livid with me. He came home yelling about how awful what I did was and how crazy my behavior was. I refused to engage in the argument, but he told his entire family about it and they judged me for calling the police on my own husband, even though I already asked him to return it. He said he was just looking out for my son and that one day we'll realize that he was right, but only when it's too late. My son isn't speaking to me or my husband. I feel horrible about the whole situation and am starting to think I handled this the wrong way. My husband Nick was married to his first wife Vanessa for 5 years and they had 2 amazing kids, Luke and Lila. Sadly, Vanessa died in an accident 11 years ago when the kids were very young. I started dating Nick 8 years ago and we started off very slowly for obvious reasons. Nick has always been a little more distant than anyone I'd ever been with. But he and the kids lost Vanessa so young that I understood it. After 3 years of dating, Nick asked me to marry him and I moved in. I've always had a really great relationship with Luke and Lila and they were happy for me to marry their dad. I had wanted an actual wedding, nothing big. But Nick really didn't want one, so we got married at the courthouse with just Luke and Lila present. We had a really fast engagement, but it worked for all of us. I have loved being Luke and Lila's stepmom and officially adopted them after I found out I was pregnant with our son, Casey. The kids have been so great with Casey and help out so much. Nick was wonderful during the pregnancy and had always been a really loving dad and husband. But Nick has been pulling away a lot the last few months. He's been even more distant than usual and working late nights and going away with friends almost every weekend. I've tried talking to him, but he's been impatient with both me and the kids. I found out I was pregnant in June and am now 21 weeks pregnant with a girl. The kids are excited to have a little sister, but Nick just seems so indifferent to everything and everyone. He's been missing soccer games, Lila's birthday, doctor's appointments, etc. Casey is too young to notice, but Luke and Lila are so hurt by their dad's absence. These kids are so good and they lost their mom so young, and I'm infuriated that Nick is ignoring the kids like this. Last week, I finally sat Nick down and told him that he needs to stop disappearing and be more present in our lives. We're going to have another child soon, and before we know it, Luke and Lila will be grown up and going to college. After an hour of arguing, he screamed at me that he wished Vanessa was still alive and that I had switched places with her and died instead. He also threw in some awful comments that I need to stop pretending I'm Luke and Lila's real mom and that I'm only half the mom Vanessa was. The final straw was him saying that he never even wanted any kids with me, but did it so I'd keep busy and leave him alone. I'm so beyond hurt right now. I know I'm just his second choice, but I've always tried to honor Vanessa and tell Luke and Lila how lucky they were to have her as their mom. I love all of our kids more than anything, and I'm just so heartbroken. Nick barely pays attention to Casey now and doesn't even acknowledge the pregnancy. He somewhat apologized this weekend and took all 3 kids to lunch, but he won't even look me in the eye. He seems like he wants to talk, but he doesn't say anything, and I'm too upset to even be near him. I'm not sure where to go from here. Honestly, I can't even be around Nick right now, and if there weren't any kids involved, I'd leave and never look back. I'm not sure if he's cheating or the thought of a 4th child is stressing him out. But I'm devastated and not sure how or why I should save this marriage, besides doing it for the kids.